Attack on the military training base near the Polish border. How will that affect NATO's response? And if Russia starts to directly target shipments of weapons making their way from, say, Poland to Ukraine, is the war getting dangerously close to a new level of escalation? Now, the attack comes as the Prime Minister gets back from his trip overseas to meet with European allies, where he was pressed on the federal government's defense spending. Remember, the NATO alliance has an agreed upon target to spend 2% of GDP on defense, but last year, Canada spent less than 1.4%. During the trip, the Prime Minister said he's open to raising Canada's military spending.
We also recognize that the context is changing rapidly around the world, and we need to make sure that the women and men who serve in the Canadian Armed Forces have all the equipment necessary to be able to stand strongly, as we always have as members of NATO, and we will continue to look at what more we can do.
So how much more could Canada increase its defense spending by? And will Canada provide more lethal and non-lethal weapons to Ukraine? Let's find out. Joining me now is the National Defense Minister, Anita Anand. Minister, always a pleasure to have you on the program. Obviously, I have to start with Russia launching this missile attack on the military range near Lviv, which is the former headquarters of the Canadian Operation Unifier. Just to be clear, are there any Canadian or NATO trainers there at the time of the attack, and any casualties?
No, Canadian Armed Forces members left Ukraine a number of days ago and are safely in Poland and other areas.
Minister, Russia said yesterday that it deemed shipments of weapons to Ukraine legitimate targets. Now they've hit this base. This is, I think at one point, it's about 15 kilometers from the Polish border. First of all, what message is Russia sending, and how will NATO respond to this attack?
Well, Russia is clearly a horrific aggressor in this situation, killing children and families randomly and committing war crimes. This latest attack is another example of unforgivable Russian aggression, and the NATO alliance stands united to ensure that, first, all help possible can flow to Ukraine. Second, that we as an alliance stand united and in support of Article 5 of the Washington Treaty, which states that an attack on one is an attack on all. We will protect every inch of NATO territory.
Minister, Canada's been sending lethal aid, the U.S. and the NATO alliance has, across the border. Now that Russia is targeting it clearly, will NATO be taking different means, sending different kinds of weapons, now that Western Ukraine and those supply lines are clearly under attack by Russia? Does NATO have to take a different means now of sending weapons to Ukraine?
I appreciate the question, Evan. Let me first start with Canadian aid. We ensured that $7.8 million worth of lethal aid arrived in Ukraine by February 22nd and was handed over to Ukrainian soldiers whom we trained as the Canadian Armed Forces. After that, we are continuing to ship our lethal aid, Carl Gustaf anti-tank weapons, rocket launchers, 7,500 hand grenades, and we are utilizing two CC-130 airplanes in order to help the NATO allies flow this aid through NATO countries. Apart from those details, however, we are keeping a very close hold on the precise logistics of the aid flowing. Why? Because of the very item that you raised in your question, that our supply lines are being carefully monitored, and we need to make sure that the aid flows safely and securely into the hands of the Ukrainian soldiers.
But just to be clear, an attack on NATO supplies is not an attack on NATO. Is that clear?
Well, it is, again, a good question, and the interpretation of Article 5 tends to surround geographical location. However, I am traveling to Brussels in the next 2 days, and I will raise questions such as this with my NATO counterparts. It is important that we take a full-fledged examination of the situation, including in the area of cyber attacks and what cyber attacks themselves mean for the interpretation of the legal documents that underpin the alliance and the deterrent and defensive structure that really is the foundation of the NATO alliance.
Okay, that's interesting. The cyber attack one's interesting. Let me talk about foreign fighters for a minute. Lots of people of Ukrainian descent around the world are flooding into Ukraine to fight. The legal status of a foreign fighter is important because soldiers are protected by Geneva Convention. Foreign fighters aren't. Are you encouraging Canadians who want to volunteer to help Ukraine to go to Ukraine? Are you encouraging Canadian foreign fighters there? And what is NATO's view on their legal status?
We are not encouraging Canadians to go to Ukraine to fight, given the very dire security situation in the country. Having said that, it is understandable, especially given the very large Ukrainian diaspora in Canada, that there are Canadians of Ukrainian descent and others who wish to go to that country to fight alongside their Ukrainian brothers and sisters. And in that regard, it is an individual decision for them to do so.
It'll be an interesting legal question when that comes up. But the Prime Minister said on his trip he's open to more military spending. Sweden is now committed to hitting 2% of their GDP, as are other countries, Germany as well. Is Canada in the next budget going to commit to reaching 2% of its GDP on defense spending, given the new realities in the world now, post-Russian invasion?
Well, I want to take a step back and clarify that we are increasing our defense spending by 70% over the 9-year period beginning in 2017. And as part of our defense spending, we are creating additional military capabilities, 6 new Arctic offshore patrol ships, 2 of which have been built, 2 new polar icebreakers, 88 new fighter jets. We will be awarding a contract this year. And in the short term, I will be bringing forward a robust package to modernize NORAD, which would be going towards the 2%. The bottom line is that we have military spending in place in an increasing way, and we will continue to respond to the evolving threat environment as we go forward, given this very dire situation.
Minister Anand, a very dangerous escalation this morning. We very much appreciate you joining us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Take care.